So last month, the PlayStation 5 came out, and if you remember, like a week or two before that even, the DualSense controller hit store shelves, and we picked one up here, did a full teardown on it, and I really wanted to check out the adaptive triggers because it sounded like such an interesting idea, and Sony talked about it every chance they could get on it, so I was like, yeah, we got to take it apart and see exactly how this is working. And when we did get it apart, you know what? It was a pretty straightforward way to make it happen, but I did have some questions about the overall durability of the mechanism inside that they were using, and now it looks like more and more cases are popping up online of the DualSense controller actually breaking with the adaptive triggers becoming much looser and even unresponsive at times. We're going to go over that here today and what the failing point appears to be, because it even surprised me a little bit. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure the like button helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're going to go over here to hot hardware, where they need to talk about it a bit with some of the cases being, oh, I was playing Spider-Man Miles Morales and I pressed down the trigger and there was like this snapping noise, and now the trigger doesn't press correctly anymore. They say most people appear to be placing blame on the puny spring for the triggers, which are either failing outright or becoming dislodged from their proper seating. The dislodging would explain the snap that is experienced in Miles Morales, and we can also see here they also give some tips on how to fix the issues yourself in the Reddit thread. I would not recommend that necessarily, just to be honest, because this controller, I feel like people will be able to get the controller apart. However, they will have the adaptive trigger out. They'll be looking at it, which some of it does include having to desolder points from the board so you can actually remove it and get a good look at it. But you're going to have it all apart. You're going to get the spring out. You're going to figure out how to get it back in, and then you're going to look down, and there's going to be parts all over the place, and you're just going to be stuck. So, I mean, if you can, send it away to Sony. All of it's still under warranty, obviously, and hey, it might be 3 or 4 weeks, but at least it's a controller that you can still find in stores very easily right now, and not the PS5 system that is, like, impossible to find anywhere. So, the spring that's being mentioned here, this is something that I looked at when we had it apart, but it was not the main focus because it's the same thing that's been used for a long time in different controllers. Controllers that have triggers that need resistance, and the way they do that is they take metal, they wind it up into a circle, and then have two ends come off of either side, and when they push those ends together to kind of bend it around, it'll always want to separate. And if you kind of lodge that between, say, the trigger and the casing with grooves on either side to kind of hold it in place, you might even kind of wrap it around like a post inside so that it doesn't go anywhere, you'll get that kind of sensation where it will try to kick the trigger back to you at all times. But it appears that something that Sony's doing with these adaptive triggers, adding their own resistance on top of that resistance, is causing some actual breaking inside on that spring. And I thought about it a little bit, and it kind of makes sense to a degree. Now, the problem I think that Sony is going to run into with these adaptive triggers is it's very unpredictable how the user is going to experience it. And what I mean by that is you might have a game that has a bunch of different weapons. You might have melee weapons, you might have different guns, bows, or something like that. And the bow uses the adaptive trigger much more than something like a melee weapon, as an example, right? So maybe one person is constantly having extra tension added to their trigger, whereas another person is not, and you're going to have more wear on that spring than another person. It's not as straightforward as just, oh, the triggers always act the same way. We've seen already different instances of the resistance inside with these adaptive triggers being used to stop you halfway in Astrobot, and then you got to press further again so you grab onto a ledge. Or if you just have a bow and they just have different tension or different points of tension or amounts, like in Assassin's Creed, light bow versus hunter's bow and all of this stuff. And I almost wonder if that unpredictability is actually affecting the spring inside, where let's say you have a really hard pull that you have to do on the trigger itself and it stops you halfway and then you let go, but then you press down again right away. That spring didn't kind of depress all the way and then go back. It went halfway with a ton of tension, then back up, then you press down again. And it seems like it's almost like you're kind of wiggling against it, and eventually it snaps at that point where it starts to bend around. And just the unpredictable nature of the adaptive trigger and how people are going to use it is going to be tough for Sony in general to test these things, because I'm sure over the course of many weeks, they just had a machine pressing this trigger over and over and over and over again. Because if you buy a keyboard or a mouse or something, a lot of times they'll tell you how many keystrokes it's good for. That's just how many times they've pressed it over and over and over again to see how well it holds up. And it's tough because it's like, how many serious amounts of tension presses did you give it, right? What about light or halfway? There's so many different variables going into the adaptive triggers, and we're hearing things like Deathloop just lock you out of the press completely. It's going to be interesting to see how the spring holds up through that. But I do believe that Sony is probably looking at this because they are, I'm sure, are fielding calls on it. And as they get some of these in for warranty repair, they will open them and they will see that the spring itself, as people have already done on different videos, is broken. So they got to figure out why that is, and most likely the spring itself will be improved or changed out with something a bit stronger. Let me know what you guys think about this down below with the DualSense controller already running into some issues with the spring inside, and let me know if you're someone who has run into an issue with your DualSense controller, whether it's the adaptive trigger and you press down or something else. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.